Hello and welcome to our weekly share on the Parsha. Parsha's Emor this week. And let's start with our dedications for people who need a refuah shlema. We have no celebrations to mention this week. And I'd like to start with someone called Chaim Morchadov ben Esther, who is not well and could do with the refuah shlema. And our usual Avram Borach ben Sora, and then Rafal Chai ben Sora. It's a Rivka Bassem Esther, my wife, the little boy, or Chaim ben Chani Yehudis, who's waiting for a lung transplant. All of them should have a refuah shlema. This is Parsha, as I said, is the Parsha of Emor. And let's look at this as the shear in between Pesach and Shavuos. We've decided to split between Megillas Rus and the Parsha. We'll start again, as we did the last few weeks, with the Parsha and Parsha's Emor, and then we will find if there's a theme connecting that to Megillas Rus. Spoiler alert, there is. So here we go. I turn to the Chumash. I don't have my Art Scroll Chumash here to hand this week. It doesn't matter. We're only looking at one posuk anyway, and that's the first posuk in the Parsha, and it says the following thing. Of course, we are looking at through the eyes of the Alshich. After Shavuos, we'll go back to looking at through the eyes of the Yeshiva of Kelm. But V'yom Hashem al Moshe. So if you've got a Chumash to hand, it's Vayikra, of course, chapter Kof Aleph, and Pasuk Aleph. V'yom Hashem al Moshe, Emor al Kohanim, speak to the Kohanim, and they are the Bnei Aaron, the sons of Aaron, brought Marta, them, and say to them, L'nefesh lo yitama b'amov, for he mustn't come into contact with a dead body amongst his people. And then it goes on to talk about all the dead bodies that a Kohen can come close to, close family members, to just encapsulate that in just a few words. Good. Now, let's consider, obviously, some difficulties with the language of the Pasuk. And remember, because it's been a while since we've been looking at the Alshich, that the Alshich style is predicated on two, they seem flippant, but I'm really quite serious, two serious points. And one of them is that Hashem is good at Hebrew, and he never makes mistakes. He never says, oops. If that is the case, then, of course, there are problems with this Pasuk. I'll read it to you slowly and see if you can spot them. V'yom Hashem al Moshe, and Hashem says to Moshe, Emor el Kohanim, speak to the Kohanim Bnei Aaron, the sons of Aaron. Well, I think we know that the Kohanim are the sons of Aaron, so the question is, why does it repeat that? But Marta Aleim, and say to them, L'nefesh lo yitama b'amov. Well, the Alshich points out at the end, up to now we've been talking in the plural. And it says, V'yom Hashem Moshe Emor el Kohanim, plural. Bnei Aaron, the sons of Aaron, sons, plural. Or Marta Aleim, and say to them, L'nefesh lo yitama ba'amov, he mustn't become impure by contact with a dead body. So suddenly it's changed, and suddenly it's gone to the singular. Why did that happen? And who doesn't know that Aaron is the father of the Kohanim are the sons of Aaron? I think that will probably do us just for getting started into what the Alshich has to say. And what he has to say here is tremendously important. First of all, Moshe is being told what to say to the Kohanim. And notice, I should have said as well, Emor al Kohanim v'amarta. Why does it say Emor v'amarta? Why is it a double expression? So Rashi already comments on that and says Emor v'amarta lahaza gedolim alektanim, a double expression of speak, to tell the older Kohanim to pass on this warning, pass on their expertise to the younger Kohanim. That's Rashi's explanation. The Alshich has a different one. Doesn't seem to be entirely satisfied with that. And we'll see what that is in just a second. Also, can I point out, as it's talking about education, it's interesting it says Emor v'amarta. The Hebrew word Emor is to speak gently. Daber is to speak harshly. And as it's talking about chinuch, somebody's in chinuch, that's sometimes difficult when you're teaching boys, let's say, teenage boys, to speak gently to them. But it seems to be that might be an approach which is going to have more success than speaking harshly, which would be denoted, of course, by the word daber. However, having said all of that, I want to read to you what the Rashi says here. And just a little bit of the Alshich says there, a little bit of the Alshich inside, and I'll tell you most of it outside. He asks several questions, and we've covered those questions. I'm not going to repeat them. And let me just read this bit of Alshich to you. Why is it, he asks, why he questions, is this whole concept of not coming into contact with a dead body more applicable, in fact, almost entirely applicable to the Kohanim than to any other Jew in Klal Yisrael? And why should it be that the priests should have no contact with dead bodies? So the Torah is very particular because to solve that problem or that difficulty or that question that people might be having at the back of their minds, then it's very specific exactly the message that Moshe has to convey to them. Because what happens is when you are involved in teaching a law to the entire Jewish people, as Moshe is, or in this case to the Kohanim, then if you're told to tell the people a law, then naturally it's going to be at the back of your mind. There's going to be some people who are not paying any attention. Not some people, individuals will not pay any attention. But as long as I've conveyed the job to the vast majority of Jews, then that's fine. And that's really nothing for me to worry about. I've done my job. I've discharged my duty as an educator. But the Torah doesn't like that. Yeah, and it's apparently, Hashem doesn't like that either. Turn the page. He says that if the majority hear and somebody decides not to listen, that's his business, right? There's always somebody fast asleep at the back of any classroom. But here, it's a lecture theater with hundreds of people, or in actual fact, millions of people. It serves him right if he doesn't pay attention to what I'm teaching. I don't have to worry. That's not the Jewish approach, he says. That is not the way. Flowery, poetic Hebrew, where light will dwell. Ki'im al yishav yonov yadavolo bilvad b'shul rabim ki am gam el echod l'shiva Hashem. You have to strive, educator, Moshe Rabbeinu, the educator par excellence. After all, his title is Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe the teacher. The teacher and all teachers have to strive to make sure that the one who might be left behind is not left behind. I remember when I was studying education at Glasgow University many a year ago, and I'm sure I must have told you this in sharing before, they told us that there was a psychological survey which they wanted to conduct in schools across the Glasgow region. And the survey was, interestingly, I'm just adjusting the screen here. I like to be in the middle. Middle of the road, that's what the Rambam says, and which they simply, of course, when you do a psychological survey, I think we all know the tricks. Whatever they say they're asking you about what they want to know is not actually what they want to know. And so they went to several primary schools, I think it was 10 primary schools, elementary schools in Glasgow. They told the teachers that they had developed a brand new IQ test which was predictive. It could predict which of the children in the class were late developers. And even though they've never educationally shone till that point, this test would predict that they are about to shine. And so they simply gave the test. It was a standard IQ test. There was no innovation, discovery, breakthrough in this IQ test at all. It was a standard, ordinary IQ test. They gave that to the teachers administered the test, and when they got the results, they simply took the bottom 3 and told the teachers that these children were going to blossom and burst into academic excellence in the coming 6 months. And of course, the surprise is, and somehow you just know this intuitively, they did. Those write-offs suddenly became stars. And how could that possibly be? Simply because the teacher believed in them, because people believed in them. They were not written off. They were not written off. And I think I told you recently about once when I was in Gateshead and I was sitting next to two of my very close friends and we're having a conversation about accepting only the best candidates in yeshivas, which they seem to approve of. And I intervened and said, but what's the point of taking the best? The best don't need you. Surely the ultimate geschmack, satisfaction, pleasure, and success in education is taking somebody who others might have thought as being useless and worthless and allowing them to grow and then become great. That to me is the ultimate in education. And the Alshik says Hashem agrees, and that's what he's telling Moshe Rabbeinu. That's why it starts off by saying the plural, speak to the Kohanim, speak to the Kohanim. But then it says that one and that one Jew, that one Cohen should not become impure through contact with a dead body. That one. But surely, if I've taught a million Kohanim and they've all got the message and one's not paying attention, it doesn't really matter. It does matter. That one might be the special one that can blossom and grow. And as I've said to you many times in the Shirim, I have many a conversation with the great rabbis who said, I was only mundane, only average in yeshiva, but I plodded and carried on. That idea is being conveyed here as well. That Moshe is being told, it switches to the singular because it's focus on that single Jew, that one Jew who's struggling, and make sure he's on board and he knows what he should be doing as well. Who knows who's great? There's a famous Gemara, and the Gemara was involved with Basra and Daf Yud on the base. And the Gemara there has got a story about the famous rabbi, and his son died, stopped breathing, technically had died, and they resuscitated him. And his father famously said to him, what did you see? He said, Olam Hofa Crazy. I saw an upside down world. The people here are considered to be the big cheese. They say big cheese in America, to be the big knackers. In heaven, they were not important at all. The people here are considered to be the write-offs, the useless, the worthless. In heaven, they were the big deal. And apparently the Rabbonim were considered the same in both in heaven and here. It's an interesting concept that I think we talked about this again recently. If you want to get a feel of what they think about you in heaven, it really depends on what people think about you down here. That would give you an indication of what they're thinking about you up there. So the Rabbonim here, what they thought about here is what they're going to be thought about in heaven as well. That's quite a nice idea. So that's why it switched to the singular. Our other question was, why did it say Aaron speak to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron? Of course, the Kohanim are definitely and inevitably the sons of Aaron. For that, it's a very interesting answer. Remember the question we asked, why is it that the Kohanim specifically banned from contact with a dead body? There's an argument that could be made that the Kohanim should not be the ones to be protected and isolated from death. They should be the ones who are primarily in the front line dealing with death. Instead of the role of a Kohen being somebody who avoids death, they should be the Chevra Kadisha, the Hebrew Burial Society. It should be something that is passed on in families, family lineage. And why specifically might you think that Kohanim should have that role, the opposite role, the antithesis of the role which they are actually given? And the answer is because they're Bnei Aaron. Who brought death to the world but Aaron? Remember, Jewish people are not meant to die. Human beings are not meant to die, I should say. Human beings are meant to be immortal. Adam Rishon was immortal. And at Mamad Har Sinai, the Jewish people achieved the level of Adam Rishon, of Adam, and once again achieved immortality. Had it not been for the catastrophe of the golden calf, then we would not have needed to have a burial society because nobody would have died. But who caused the disaster of the golden calf? Who made the golden calf? Aaron. So maybe as Aaron made the golden calf, which stopped us reaching or maintaining that level, the spiritual level, the return to the level of Adam Rishon, maybe therefore the punishment should be the testimony of that event should be for the generations. His children should be the Chevra Kadisha. In saying that the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, should have no contact with a dead body, the Torah is expressing it's quite the opposite. Indeed, Aaron did make the golden calf, but not in order to facilitate what they wanted for the golden calf, but rather to try and oppose and delay and postpone the whole denouement of the tragedy of the golden calf, in order that Moshe could return, because of course they thought that Moshe had died. So in case you thought, as we said before, that Kohanim, being the sons of Aaron, should be condemned to deal with dead bodies, no. It's testifying to the fact that Aaron Aaron's motivation in making the golden calf was noble, in a real sense correct, and that's why he and his lineage should have no contact with dead bodies whatsoever, because their motivation was to make sure there should be no death, that should not return to the world. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do so. But who knows? If we return to the previous theme, who knows who is the special person in Klal Yisrael and who's not the special person in Klal Yisrael? When the Gemara says Olam Hofach Reisi, I saw a topsy-turvy world, an upside-down world. The great people, or the people considered great here, were not so great, not such a big deal upstairs. That means that very often the people we think to be the write-offs down here might not be. And of course, we have the concept, Kabbalistic concept of 36 hidden tzaddikim, heavenly saints, human beings in this world whose level is literally the highest it could possibly be, almost touching heaven, heavenly saints. These 36 hidden tzaddikim don't seem to be who they are. If they were great, well known to be great tzaddikim, then we would know all about them. There's a famous story I had from, a Hasidic story I heard from my dear friend, Rabbi Professor Dr. David Gottlieb, many years ago, about that the Baal Shem Tov said about himself. He said that when he was about to be born, there was he and another soul, and they made apparently a pact together that when they were born, they would never cry, and by so doing, distress or upset their mother. And the Baal Shem Tov admitted that he was able to partially keep that oath, that pre-birth oath. When he was born and when his mother was at home, he never cried. But when she went out for whatever errand, she had to leave the house, and he was left with somebody else, sibling or somebody else to look after him, then he cried. He said a remarkable thing. I was punished for that. I was condemned to fame. I was condemned to fame. The implication of that statement is that the other soul with whom he made the pact, who tried both together to achieve that level, he succeeded where the Baal Shem Tov didn't. And we never heard of him. We don't know who he is. If he was as well known as tzaddik as the Baal Shem Tov, we would know about him. But it means that the 36 hidden tzaddikim who've reached this incredible level are very often invisible. In fact, they are invisible. And they might be hiding in plain sight amongst us as just ordinary Jews, or even bad Jews. The Gemara in the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Dessa brings this in page 116, if I remember rightly. Yes, it's 116. In the Chelik Gimel of Mitzvah Eliyahu. So we've got a little bit of Kelm into the share anyway. And it says the following thing. The Yerushalmi Tainas, Perak Aleph Halacha Dalet, Muva Maisa Nifla Al Ish Shmo Pantikoka. There was something called Pantikoka. Shohu and Panti, like Pentagon, 5. Pantikoka, is going to explain in a minute, means 5 sins. He did 5 sins every day. That he was well known as being a sinner, a bad person. And what did he do that was so bad? I mean, it's the sort of name you would never mention at the table in front of the children. You might not even mention it amongst the adults. This guy was in charge of the local bordello. And he did 5 things every day. Bad things every day. Interestingly, there was a drought. Drought leads to famine. Famine leads to death and disease. All the rabbis prayed, please, Hashem, open the heavens, let the rains fall. Nada, nothing. Pantikoka prayed. And one of them had a message, go and ask Pantikoka to pray. What? Pantikoka? Went and asked that Pantikoka to pray. Pantikoka prayed and the rain fell. They summoned Rabbi Bavua, brought him to him, and said, what do you do? What's so special about you? I don't know. I do terrible things all day. In your eyes, I do terrible things all day. And he explained what he did. His duties in the bordello, setting the stage for the performances, the lewd performances that would lead to of course, the ultimate purpose of such places, and all the other things that he did. However, he let slip that once he did something really, really great, which betrayed that his motivation for making this place, this establishment, the most successful of its kind, was so the occupying Roman troops would not compel and force Jewish women to become the Zionas of the place. He made it the most successful nightclub in town so that people could go there and have a nice time and leave the Jewish girls alone. Who knows who is great and who's not great? You just can't predict. And there's a famous story, I'm sure I've told you this one as well, that I think it was in Lodz, the SS rounded out about 200 Jews, took them into one of the large synagogues there, opened the Orna Kodesh, took out the Sefer Torah, untied it, and threw it like a paper roll on the ground. And the Jews had to go past it. The SS are standing there with their machine guns and their German Shepherd dogs growling and snarling. And they had to spit on it. Actually, I was told by somebody who survived this, no, they didn't have to spit on it. They had to, forgive me, urinate on it. And there was one guy who was a gangster, literally a gangster. He was into drugs and prostitution and all the rest of the stuff. And he refused. And he was warned, and they wanted him to do it. Do it or we'll shoot you. Shoot me. And he was shot. Who would you have thought would have been the last one in the world to give up his life rather than do this appalling act to a Sefer Torah? The gangster. Who knows who's great? Who knows who's great? That takes us to Rus. If you remember, before I get to Rus, a few weeks ago we looked at Das Chochmah Mussar of Rabbi Yerucham, and Rabbi Yerucham said how everything is in time. Everything that happens is in time. Remember the Medrash that said there's a time for Adam Rishon to go into Gan Eden, a time for him to go out of Gan Eden, a time for the Jewish people to come and get the Torah Mount Sinai, and set times for everything in the world. And he says that time, therefore, you should understand, is not something which is peripheral, something which is just a metric, a measure, but rather everything that's going to happen in the world is contained within Hashem's creation called time. What does it mean that there was a time for him to go out of Gan Eden? Surely the reason that Adam was kicked out of Gan Eden was because of what he did, waiting for Mitzvah Das. No. It's only if the time is licensed, I'm struggling for a word here, is designed for that event to happen, will it happen? That means to say, had Adam Rishon did what he did, but at a different time, that would not have been sufficient to get him out of Gan Eden. It has to be in combination with time. There are things that are going to happen in time. It comes out like this, if you remember when we did this, that basically there are certain events that are definitely going to happen in time. Whether or not we're able to exploit them positively or negatively, that's a matter of bechira, it's a matter of choices. That's a matter of the choices that you or I make. Because Hashem's going to make things happen. The question is, are we going to imagine a train? The train is going to leave the station at a certain time, 7 o'clock. Did you get yourself to the station on time? Did you bring your suitcase? Did you pack properly? Pack all the things you're going to need for the journey? Otherwise, you're not going to get in the train. And similarly, you're going to get off the train. You have to not fall asleep. You have to be able, when it pulls into the platform, to get off. Otherwise, you'll still be on it and have missed the destination you sought and you wanted to get to. Interesting idea. Everything, he says, is in time. It's programmed into time. It's going to happen. But how you react to it and how it affects you, that's a question for your Bechira. In Megillas Rus, we can find certainly somebody who we can continue the theme that we were discussing before about people you would never in a million years expect to have achieved greatness. After all, she comes from Moab. Moab is the most disgusting, say the rabbis, of all the nations. The Gemara says that they started from incest, Lot and his daughters, and boasted of the fact, Moab, from my father. And they were totally sexually corrupt. And yet from there comes the mother of the Mashiach, comes Rus, the great-grandmother of David HaMelech, the Messianic line. So let me read to you what he says here. And this you'll find in chapter base of Megillas Rus. So what happens is she comes Rus, which remember, this was our proposition. We've covered this already. To Naomi, I will go and I will harvest the fallen pearls of barley from the harvesters in the field singular, agriculture, after, far away from the harvesters, so that I don't provoke them in any way to think that I'm a lewd, promiscuous Moabite girl. The Mikra, and a chance event happened. What was the chance event happening? Boaz comes. Chelkas is under the Boaz. The field that she came to happened to be the field of Boaz. Boaz, the man, of course, she's going to marry to produce the child. Oved is going to produce the child who is Ishai, who's going to produce the child who is David. Asher b'mishpachas Melech. Now, this is very interesting. So I'll read through this, what the Alshach says here. The Yikar Mikra, again, a double expression, something which the Alshach dealt with in this expression. Emor and Rus. The chance event was that the field was the field of Boaz. The man in the future she would marry to be able to produce the next link in the messianic chain. Because through Yibum, levirate marriage, we discussed this last week, then that is what's going to secure the relationship, secure the union, the conception of the next link in the chain. Okay. And then, Omagam ki lo, sorry, last place. Higam lo bat zivugo ha'isa kedera kol yavim. Omagam ki lo Yisrael ha'isa. Even though she didn't come from Cloud Throne. Ki im avia. She was a Moabite woman. And through her choice, Lizgar, to become a Jew, then that choice, Vayikar, her choice, will produce the next chance event. The chance event was going to happen anyway. Boaz was going to come at that moment in time. Hashem was arranging that bit, that Boaz would come to the field at that moment in time. It would be his field. Was she going to be there? Or would she have chosen, like her sister, not to join the Jewish people? The train's there for her to get on board, but she might have been at a different train station, or no train station at all. The Vayikar, the thing that happened, the first chance event, the first coincidence that produces the second coincidence, Vayikar Mikra, and incidentally, one is the masculine, one is the feminine. They fit together, these two events, was the product of her choice. Once again, somebody you would never have thought would have been the person who's the hidden tzaddik. In this case, the hidden tzaddikus would have a part in the story of the Mashiach. But who knows who a person is? Who can judge? Hashem makes things happen at certain times. Certain events are programmed into the history of the world. Our job is to make ourselves ready to exploit those opportunities when they come along. Because if they come along, as they do come along, if they come along when they're destined to come along and we're not ready, we miss the train. In the case of Rus, she's got herself ready. She's able to exploit it. And the person you might have written off, like Panticoca, like all the others that we think are great people here, but in heaven they're not, and all the people we ignore here who turn out to be great people, it just happens to be that that's the wrong perspective. Because these people, the people we don't know, very often are working in themselves to make themselves ready for the moments that come along, which allow them to grab onto greatness. Carpe diem, grab the moment. And I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Shabbos.